It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Howdy, howdy, ho. Hey, 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 hee, 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 ha. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, as always, Douglas Coleman. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Laura Ciel is here today. Dr. Ciel is a licensed clinical psychologist. She's also an expert on relationships, emotional intelligence, and living life to the fullest. She's the co-author of a book called Rock Solid: From the Bedroom to the Boardroom, and is currently writing a memoir about the years she realized that her life was worth living. It's a very interesting interview. We get into a good conversation about different types of relationships and how you can work to improve them. Before we get to Dr. Ciel, we've got a couple of songs to play. These are from Music X-Ray, a couple of my favorite songs that I thought I would play again. We've played these before. First one is If I Wait by Sara P, and the second one is Safely Back Home by Crosshairkid. So, on with the music, then a short commercial break, and then the interview with Dr. Ciel.
And if I wait for you to say, this is what you want, baby, I'd be waiting on forever, but I don't have the time, spent it all on you, and what you still can't say. And if I wait, the weather's getting cold, and this ain't what I want, but lately I've been feeling warmer here when I'm alone, 'cause I ain't got the time, spent it all on you, and what you still can't say. Each night I'ma sleep a little better, and each day I'll be a little more together, and you and your ego will be alright. It won't keep you awake, I won't be lonely, 'cause I'm keeping all the loving that I gave. I'm giving it back to me, 'cause I need it more, and I'm sending all of your well wishes out the door. You've done me in this time, and I just can't wait. No, I just can't wait. Yeah, I know I'll be waiting on what ain't gonna come, 'cause it's impossible to give you everything that you want. Yeah, I know it's not the first time that I said I was done, but it's the first time that I'm taking back the loving that I gave. For you to say, this is what you want, baby, I'd be waiting on forever, and I don't have the time, spent it all on you, and what you still can't say. Each night I'ma sleep a little better, and each day I'll be a little more together, and you and your ego will be alright. It won't keep you awake, I won't be lonely, 'cause I'm keeping all the loving that I gave. And if I wait, and if I wait, and if I wait, I won't be lonely, 'cause I'm keeping all the loving that I.
Chills in the air, clears my ears and pulls my hair. Crisp the ground beneath my feet. Moon's up in the sky, I say goodnight, she don't reply. She's got places she needs to be. I am safely back home, I am warm beneath my sheets. I secure. Ghosts and ghouls can't get my feet. I am fighting all fears and the phantasms in my mind. I am great, I am good, I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. Don't sleep all through the night. Dawning sunlight is so bright. Paints the walls in my room gold. Let it soak into my skin. Let the joyfulness all in. And through the day let it leak out my soul. I am safely back home. I am warm beneath my sheets. I am tucked away secure. Ghosts and ghouls can't get my feet. I am fighting off the fears and the phantasms in my mind. I am great, I am good, I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. Wouldn't it be so lovely just to fall asleep? Put my head down, drift away. But I just toss and turn, think about deeds, think about words. Shake my head in my foolish way. Oh, I am safely back home. I am warm beneath my sheets. I am tucked away secure. Ghosts and ghouls can't get my feet. I am fighting all fears and the phantasms in my mind. I am great, I am good, I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. I am safely back home. I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. I am tucked away secure. I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. I am fighting all fears and the I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine. I am great, I am good. I'm alright, yeah, I'm just fine.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on epsmusicproductions.com. That's EPPSproductionsmusic.com. and I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Dr. Laura Ciel. Hi, Dr. Ciel. How are you?
I'm wonderful this morning. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Let's see, you are a licensed psychologist, and what else did you do? I'm looking at your bio. You did a whole bunch of stuff here. It looks like
I am a licensed psychologist. I've been president of my local psychological association. I'm also accredited internationally as a coach, so I do some coaching training as well as psychology.
What kind of coaching?
But primarily focus on emotional intelligence, relationships, building teams, people getting along, that type of thing.
Emotional intelligence. That almost sounds like a contradiction in terms.
It's not.
Why don't you explain?
If emotional intelligence is really low, then it is.
Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, just really simply what it is we all have emotions where we cannot stop those from happening, and sometimes the emotions come on and they negatively impact how we interact, how we make choices in our own life and also how we interact with other people. So emotional intelligence is the training and the learning and the expanding of how do I manage my emotions in a way that best serve me and best serve my family, best serve my relationships, best serve my work and my community around me.
So you're talking about people who have particular emotional issues, or?
No, not necessarily. It would be, for example, you might be showing up for work in the morning and maybe you had a fight with your spouse or something happened with your kids. It kind of threw you off. So you show up at work and the emotions from that interaction carry over into the next scenario, into the next relationship, into the next interaction. So you may showing up at a team meeting in a really different space than what's going to be best for you, what's going to be best for your team. So emotional intelligence is recognizing that and being able to do what you need to do to manage that so that it does not negatively impact other relationships.
Oh, I see. Okay. So emotional management, basically.
Yeah. It's the intelligence of knowing what to do when the emotions when you start to feel the emotions.
It's like, what's the old example? The guy has a bad day at work and he comes home and kicks the dog.
Kicks the dog, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Misdirected anger, I think.
Right, and it can snowball. That's the thing that, if it were just one isolated event, it's wouldn't have a big impact, but the less you are able to manage that, the more it really has a snowball effect. And so the next thing you know is everything that's happening at work is impacting things negatively at home and then impacting your maybe you're dating and it's impacting those relationships. So it just kind of has a snowball effect. It starts to feel like it's out of control.
It's a funny thing about emotions because There is kind of a balance. On the one hand, you don't want to be your emotions just pouring out. You know, every time somebody says something, you start crying. But at the same time, you don't want to be so controlled that people think you're just cold.
Right. Yeah. And emotional intelligence is not necessarily controlling and trying to ignore it. It's knowing how, I live in California, so I think of the metaphor with a surfer on a wave. You can't control the wave, but how you move and how you set yourself up and how you ride that wave is going to determine how you feel, whether or not you get crushed by the wave, whether or not you run into someone else. And so it's the emotions come, and it's not necessarily ignoring or trying to control them to the point that they're not there, because it's actually not possible. It's learning how to ride them, learning how to manage them.
Well, that's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Just so people know, because some people don't, what is the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of people don't know. The primary difference is a psychiatrist is a medical doctor, has gone through medical school training, has that MD, and therefore is licensed to prescribe medications. A psychologist has gone through doctoral training to become a psychologist, which is it's usually a PhD or a PsyD. A PsyD is more specific to the clinical practice of psychology. It's a doctoral level degree with the training to do therapy, different forms of therapy. Most psychologists do not have the license to prescribe. I say most because there are a few programs through the military that are checking to see whether or not it might be a good idea. Psychologists can work in multiple settings. Psychiatrists tend to work primarily in hospital, inpatient psychiatric hospital, or behavioral health. And psychologists, you can see them, and psychiatrists in private practice, of course, as well. Psychologists can, that you might see them in an organization, you might see them in a school, you might see them in a hospital, as well as private practice.
You were a co-author of a book called Rock Solid, From the Bedroom to the Boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little about the book.
Well, what I found, and my co-author who wrote this book, what we found in all of our work over the years, since I've been in this field for many, many, many years, more than coming up on somewhere between 25 and 30 years. So I've been in this field for a long time, and there are certain things that come up over and over and over again. They're kind of the precursors to problems that develop. And in relationships, a lot of times people, when they want to work with me around relationships, they're really focusing on the other person and what the other person is or isn't doing. And this book is really about setting yourself up so that you can be as prepared and in your integrity, in your strength, in your power, so that you can show up as the best partner in a relationship, which is a little bit the opposite of what most people start to think. So it's a really simple 4-step process that allows anyone, no matter if you're wanting to make better your relationships at home, with a significant other, with your children, or at work, or with your neighbor for that matter. There are things that you can do that can help set you up to make those relationships better, even if the other person doesn't change.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Let's just talk a little bit about that, because I know that in a relationship, a husband and wife, spouse, whatever, it's not an exact science. And I know just something very simple that my grandfather said a long time ago to me. He said, it takes work, and both sides have to work at it. I've always had the problem of trying to determine, without doing the counting the cookie, like, I gave you something, so now you got to give me something, because I don't want to, get into that. But how do you know at a point where maybe you're just giving too much and the other person's not giving enough?
Well, it's interesting. If you're giving, I love your question, because if you're giving too much, to me, what that's saying is you're trying to hold up the relationship, right? So that's what that's what it sounds like, is like you're trying, you're doing, you're giving. You're going to feel wiped out and you're going to feel resentful, and it's not going to work if the other person isn't. And you're going to feel it really quickly. Most people feel it pretty quickly. But if when you do the work, back to what your grandfather said, the work of setting yourself up and getting yourself strong, you actually are going to feel better, and you're going to have greater clarity as to whether or not that relationship should continue or stop. Because as you do your work, so this isn't you doing for the other person, this is you doing your work. How can you set yourself up to be as healthy, happy in your day? Then the more that you do that, the more you're going to realize whether or not the other person is on board. So there's a subtle difference between actually doing with the expectation that the other person is going to do something versus doing your internal work so that you're the best partner ever. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just kind of processing that because
it's very subtle.
Yeah, it is very subtle. I'm thinking that there's a lot of kind of gray area there, which might get misinterpreted by both sides, really.
Yeah, the best way to note it, or the best way that you could have an indicator as to what exactly is happening, is if you are doing things in the relationship and you start to feel really bad. That's an indicator that you're doing things with the expectation that the other person is going to respond a certain way, and that's a really it's not a healthy, and it's a really a path that doesn't feel good for either partner. Whereas if you start to feel good and you feel strong and you're a little bit emotionally, you're kind of watching your partner and going, wow, that's really interesting. This, he's doing this or she's doing that, or he's not doing this, she's not doing that. And there's not a strong resentment and anger, then you're doing your work, which is only going to serve you and that relationship. So how you feel is the difference as to whether or not you're doing something that can serve the relationship or not.
Okay. Somebody else told me, too, that a good relationship is two circles that slightly overlap. How do you feel about that?
That's interesting. I'm guessing, because I'd have to understand a little bit what they mean. I'm guessing what that person means by that is you've got two individuals, and that each individual has their own path, their own journey, really, that's independent of their partner. And that I completely agree with. And the overlap, I'm guessing, is the way that I would see it is their journeys are overlapping in part of their, if you look at a lifetime, a lifespan of life, whatever number of years we each get, then there will be, if you're married or in a significant relationship with a partner, you're along that journey together for a while, maybe sometimes till the end of life, but usually a couple doesn't die at the same time. So there's this idea of each person has their journey, that we each have we have the things that we're meant to learn and explore and expand that are a little bit different than our partner. And yet there's such incredible opportunity to share and celebrate and have fun with that other person. So I could see how that would work with the two circles and a little bit overlapping.
I guess I interpreted it slightly different, where I thought, okay, you're each individuals, but you each have your own interests. And those interests are sort of on the outside part of the circle. And the part that overlaps is the life that you've created together, which in many cases with people could be children.
Right.
Because once you have children with somebody, then that's a permanent bond, whether,
right.
Whether you stay together or not.
Right.
Oftentimes people have work that's, one person goes to one job, one person goes to another job. Right.
Well, and that, if I were to look at it that way, I would say that overlap section would be fluid, right? So it may expand or it may shrink depending on where a couple is in their life. And because you could share interests and really have a fun time with those those outside of work interests. You could maybe share work and maybe have so there's a fluidity to that. How big is that overlap? How big or small is that overlap? I mean, the thing that I say to people is you really just don't, what you want to avoid, because it's not healthy for either partner, is what I would say is being fused. So the sense that you don't exist without the other person. That's when you start to get into some real. It can take some years to show up or blow up, for that matter. But when you're too fused with the other person, then the circles are completely on top of each other, and there's no independent. You've lost track of your path. Being a musician, the couple that came to mind was John and Yoko. When you said fused. Yeah, I'm sure some people would definitely see it that way who were around them. Yeah, especially the other Beatles when he kept dragging her into the studio with him. Right. I don't think that I could get along with somebody like that. I think I need to have my side of the circle, and they can have their side of the circle, and then we have ours in the middle. I mean, how wonderful, right? That each person has these really unique interests and passions that they can bring into the relationship, not to fuse with the other person, but to just bring in some fresh energy. I think it's one of the most wonderful things in a relationship to have those different backgrounds or the different passions or the different interests, focus that you're doing. And you're bringing it into the relationship even though you're not doing it together, because it actually, as you said, you're someone who likes to have your things, your interests. Well, that then fuels you to feel better about yourself, to be more relaxed, more passionate, more whatever it is. And that's what you bring to a relationship. I agree. I don't think I would want a partner that agreed with me on everything or liked the exact same things that I like. I wouldn't either. I mean, it might be fun for a little while, but, at some point, fighting over the remote is a good thing. No, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch, I get a lot of people who work with me who say they're so frustrated with their partner because when they ask them a simple thing, such as what do you want for dinner, or where do you want to go, or what do you want to do, the answer is something like, I don't know, what do you want to do? And it really irritates people. Yeah, I don't like that either. But what do you want? Who are you? What is it that you want? That's what most people want to hear. That's kind of like a dog almost. Right. Right. I mean, dogs are great. They'll just go wherever you want them to go. That's right. They don't care. But with a dog is a different relationship, I think, when you're significant other. Okay, well, as long as we're talking about this, then let's hit on your topic that how much time should you give a first date before you bail? Now, is this something you've done a lot of studying about, some research on this? I have, I have done a lot of qualitative research in the sense that I've worked with so many people. I, of course, have done a lot of research, reading and critiquing, but this is one of those areas that the formal psychology research, it's a little hard to really nail it down, right? Because there are so many variables that go into this. It would be so wonderful if we could say, okay, give it 1 hour and 15 minutes. And if you're not feeling it, say goodbye. Or, if you are feeling it, say, okay, next step. But there are so many variables that go into this. It's really hard to do hardcore quantitative research on it. So in looking over all of the people who I've known and looking at what works and what doesn't work for setting up for, and I'm talking about people who really want a partner. So there are dates, there are first dates where maybe people might just be looking to hook up. They might just be not serious, but just want to be out, not want to be home alone. It's a little bit different. I'm usually in this arena, I'm talking to people who really would like to have a relationship, not necessarily get married, but like to be in a relationship with someone. So they're saying, how much time do I waste if I don't feel that this is the right match? Or how much time should I give someone to determine, if I'm not sure I'm feeling it, that I give them to to see whether or not this is something I want to pursue. So I'm looking at it I just want to make it clear, I'm looking at it from that standpoint. And again, like I said, there's so many variables. So when should you bail? If you have a really bad feeling and you can't shake it, I don't care if it's 15 minutes, 3 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks of seeing someone, you got to trust your instincts. There's something in you telling you, ooh, it doesn't feel good. And someone can look really fantastic on the outside. And I don't mean just physical appearance, but, oh, they have this job, they do this, they live here, they look this way, they treat me well, but you just have a feeling that doesn't feel good. Trust that. So that's the first thing that I would say.
The one thing just from personal experience that I've come across with me is that if you go out with the intention of hoping to find somebody, you never do.
That's such a great point.
The few relationships that I have been in have always happened when I least expected it. I was completely on a different mental energy. I was involved with something else. I was doing something, and then boom, here's this person. And it's like, oh my God.
Such a great example.
Yeah.
Because you were out being you. You were out loving what you love. You were out doing what you love to do. You were being passionate and you were so in that you attracted someone that was interested in that. So you were giving, people talk a lot about the pheromones, the smells that people put out, whether it be putting on perfume or just the natural body smells as having, they've done a lot of research on what attracts people, but the energy that you're putting out is also so important. So if you go out, like you said, looking for someone, usually, I won't speak to you, you can say whether or not this is you, but usually people get a little bit uptight because they want to present themselves a certain way. The primary thing in their mind is something along the lines of, I want to find someone. What if I don't? I hope I do. What if they don't like me? What if I find someone they don't, that kind of a weird inner dialogue that we have, that we all have to a certain degree. And so if you think about that, that's completely different energy that you're putting out when you go out into a public space than if you're just loving doing what you love, whether it's music, whether it's dancing, whether it's playing volleyball, whatever it is. Someone's going to feel that energy and go, ooh, I like that. But if you're so worried about how you're presenting yourself, that other person can't really see you for who you are. So it's less likely that there'd be a good connection there.
Well, that's a great point, because typically when people get all made up to go out, so to speak, they don't even see themselves as they really are. They're seeing themselves as they want to appear.
As they want to be perceived.
As they want to be perceived. So they're kind of putting up this, is it eminence front? Is that the right term?
They're putting on a facade.
A facade, yeah, okay.
It's out of integrity with who they are.
And, so the person that they're trying to attract sees that, not really who they are, yeah? And that you could be attracting the wrong person.
And it's interesting, again, another opportunity for a snowballing effect that's not good is that, let's say that there is a contact made and there is a follow-up to that. What I find is if you are that person who kind of put on that facade because you're trying to find someone, you start to feel so stressed before you go out with that person because you're actually not being you. You're being a little off of who you are, and that's stressful for all of us because it's not true. It's not honest. It's not an integrity. So we're already thrown off trying. And then the other thing is we're just hoping that they don't leave. We're hoping that they want to continue with us. We're hoping that they don't bail on the date, which brings this nervous energy, which is not fun for anyone to be around. So you're actually setting yourself up for it to be more likely that they do say, hey, I'm not feeling it here.
Yeah. I don't know. I would be interested to find out how many people have actually succeeded when they consciously went out to look for somebody. And
I'll tell you, I mean, and the people that I've worked with, sometimes it's funny because maybe they've stayed together for a period of time, but you know, I might be seeing someone and they're just, I just don't know. It's not, I thought this, I thought that. And there's a lot of, if you can think of feeling secure and then the opposite of that means that one or both people really not showing up who they are. So both people are untethered, you know, they're not connected. There's no secure attachment to the other person because it's built on something that's not truth.
Right. And here's a hypothetical question. Do you think that it was easier? I mentioned my grandfather. We'll go back to him. He was born in 1909, and he was married in 1917. No, wait a minute, 1927. He was 18 years old when he got married to my grandmother, and she was 16. So they got married very young. But in those days, you know, people were like, oh, great. You know, they didn't think like, oh, Jesus. It wasn't quite the same response, right? Anyways, they stayed together for their whole life. They died a year apart. And they died in their 80s. Mm-hmm. So my question is, the hypothetical is, do you think it was easier back then? Or do you think it just because of the way the society was so black and white that you found one and you stuck with them through thick and thin? No matter what. Great question. And as an aside, both of my grandparents, and they were born around the same time as your grandparents, both sets of my grandparents, they didn't marry in their teens, but their early 20s, stayed together their entire lives, and all lived to be pretty close to 90 years old. And so I'm coming from the same family history, type of family history as you, and seeing that, and my parents as well stayed together until my mom died, happily married. Now that, for all of you people out there, that doesn't mean there are no problems. You know, probably your grandparents, my grandparents would certainly say there are tough moments. So I would say two things. I would say, the first thing is, I believe that there is a shift and change around our entire world. I believe that there's a shift and change in relationships and what is and married or not married. So we're talking about significant relationships, and even that is a change, right? People can be in a long-term relationship without being married and be very committed, just as committed as people who are technically married. I believe there is a shift and change in what people are perceiving as relationship, what they want out of relationship. And I think that some of that is really a good thing, but I think we're in transition on that. So I think there's an impact from that, where people are questioning, what does it mean to be married? What do I want if I am married? And there's a little bit of the old style was definitely, there are people who are pushing against the old style masculine, feminine roles in a marriage. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's really wonderful to explore and look at what could be an even more wonderful way to create unions with one another. And so I think that has had an impact because people are in a little bit more of a questioning state than our grandparents were, for example. They didn't question. This is what people did. They, they got married at some particular point, and this is, and usually she would raise the children and he would work and they would do things as a family. And it was very clear and it was very simple. So I think our times, we're in a questioning place, and so people are not really, there's one foot in that old world and there's one foot in a world that's coming up that maybe, in my view, could be even more wonderful relationships, but we're not quite there yet. So I think there's an impact from that. The second thing is all of the social media and all of the continually, we're continually bombarded by external visual, audio information. And I think that, because I do a little bit of work with young adults, and wow, I'm so glad that I'm not a teenager right now, because it's really hard to, number one, figure out who you are. And if you don't know who you are, how do you show up in a relationship? So I think it's, in that sense, it's
it was so much easier back then for our grandparents. They had very little other than family input and a little bit around their community input on what relationships are like and who they are too. You know, you come from this family, this type of family. This is, you know, what's important to us. These are our values. You find someone you connect with similar, and you last for 65, 70 years together. You know, nowadays, my gosh, it's just everyone in their teens and early adult years, and honestly a little bit older, just trying to find some firm ground to stand on, to know who am I and who am I and what do I want from life and what do I want from a relationship. So I think that's so much more difficult now.
I would have to agree. Back then with the grandparents, the roles were very defined.
Right.
And like you said, you know, the man would go work and the woman would stay home and take care of the children. And they usually had a strong community, be it with church or with neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
The social fabric was much stronger then. I think technology, number one, has destroyed people's attention span.
That's for sure.
That's one thing. And it's also destroyed this idea of unity, especially now in America. And I don't want to get political if this is about Trump and Hillary, but the country is so divided. And I'm not sure that we've been this divided maybe since the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a big division in the Vietnam War between the kids and the adults. And that was before social media. So I can't entirely blame technology on that. I think we're kind of going through a repetitive history just on different issues. But the funny thing is that the 60s kids, the hippies, the rebels and stuff, all ended up getting jobs. and now they're retiring, with a pension and a 401k. I don't know. It's interesting to kind of look and see what you think is going to happen to the teenagers.
Well, we're
of now.
certainly, I mean, I think we certainly can all agree that we're in a time of, you could use the word upheaval, you could use the word transformation, you could use the word change, but when you're in the midst of change, it can feel really bad. And one of the things that I always point out to people is it doesn't mean it's all bad. It's actually, when there's a challenge like this, it's an incredible opportunity. And if you can focus on the opportunity in front of you, right? So we can't control everything outside of us, but we can control ourselves. And by control, I don't mean like keep you under control. I mean, you can build your strength, you can build your power, you can build your emotional intelligence, that type of thing. Where is the opportunity for you in this upheaval? Where is the opportunity for you in this challenge? And I know, for myself and some other people who I have worked with who were in long-term relationships that then disintegrated or blew up in, after 20 years, 25 years, that's a huge moment of upheaval, of change. But there's such great opportunity in that moving forward to really take a little bit of time and reassess what are my values and what really does matter to me, and looking at how would I define the most beautiful, wonderful relationship that I could imagine being in. And that lends a positive, there's something, number one, you feel like there's something that you can do. And number two, you're looking for something. It's not all Pollyannish. Oh, it's so wonderful. It's looking for something that could be a positive in a really dark moment. So I think we're in a big moment of change, and relationships are in a big moment of change. Individual relationships and relationships as a just general concept.
All right, the last type of relationship that I want to touch on, and then we can kind of wind this down. We've talked about significant others, and we talked about our grandparents. How about children? Parents to children. My thoughts have always been it's a real balance between letting your kids do whatever they want and being so strict that you just dictate to them what they shall do. Mm-hmm. I had like one parent each in that,
Right. Well, that made it interesting for you, didn't it?
Yeah. One was one way and one was completely the other way. So I think I just grew up confused. And it took me a long time to figure out, exactly where I was to fit into this world. So what do you think? How is I hate to say, what do you think makes a great parent? Because that's so subjective. But what do you think is a good formula to try to be a good parent?
I believe that the parent-child relationships are also in this moment of transformation. I believe that what used to work is no longer, and by work, I mean that the world, society accepted it, and that's just the way it was, and the children accepted it to a certain extent. I know I grew up knowing what I was supposed to do and what I was not supposed to do, and it was very clear, and I was a very good student, not just at school, but a student of knowing what I should do and what I shouldn't do. That sometimes when I look back now, I think, oh, well, that's where I lost my way, because I stopped paying attention to my internal information, data, red flags, whatever it be. And I paid too much attention to what the others around me were expecting. But I would say that what's happening now, what I have seen is there's a shift in, and who knows why or how this is happening, but our children are no longer willing to conform the way that my generation did. And that lack of conformity shows up in so many different ways that anyone who's trying to use the old discipline styles are really hitting their head against the wall going, why isn't this working? This worked when my parents did this with me. It worked, And so there's a huge shift and change happening in that relationship as well. And as far as for anyone who's a parent, it is such an incredible honor and such an incredible learning opportunity. And these little beings that come in that are entrusted to us they're actually really wise souls. And if we don't pay attention to that, it's not going to look pretty. This generation and the ones that are the young ones, they just are not going to fit into our old. They're basically telling us, I think in their own words, the system sucks. I'm not willing to suck it up and pretend that it doesn't. So I'm going to do it differently. And how each child does it differently looks differently. So as a parent, recognizing that your kids actually have some wisdom in them. They might not be able to articulate it in words. So the more that you can do your work. In fact, I was just talking to a mother the other day who was she was questioning whether or not she should spend any time on herself because she didn't want to sacrifice time for her kids. And after the conversation, she said, wow, if I can do X, Y, Z, then I can model that to my kids. And I would love for them to know that by the time that they're in their 20s. So the modeling, stop pointing to the kids and telling them what they're doing wrong, and put the finger back on you and really get yourself solid, get yourself strong, get yourself in integrity. And the most powerful thing we can do is model that to our kids. And I think a lot of times it's just easier to point to the child being wrong or not doing it right because of our own stuff. How often have you seen a parent try to get their kids to do something because it makes them uncomfortable? So there's not one easy answer for that either, but being very mindful about what matters to you as a parent, what matters to you in your family, what qualities you want your children to develop over time is going to help you be less reactive. The goal is to be less reactive when a child does something that pushes your button, and be able to pause, take a moment to look at the bigger picture, and be in a really calm state and then you have a conversation. And if there's a consequence, it's usually there's a natural consequence in those situations. Usually you don't have to do a lot of discipline, and sometimes you do. I think parents give kids too much right now. I think parents try to do too much for their kids, so our kids grow up and they think they can't do anything because their parents have been doing it for the last 18 years for them. Parents do homework, parents do projects, parents, I've run all over town doing this, that, and the other thing out of a sense of fear or a sense of lack or a sense of something in the parent. And then the child ends up going away, if they go away to college, if they move out of the home, kind of going, what do I do now?
I think for me, I agree with everything you say. I think for me, is doing the best you can to try to enable your child's self-confidence is probably a good step in the right direction to being a good parent. Because if you do everything for them, they will have no self-confidence.
Right.
And if you don't do anything for them, they're going to be scared to death.
Right.
There is a balance where, you kind of have to let them go and fall off the bicycle, but be there if they do fall off, to hug them and, put a Band-Aid on their knee and say, I love you.
Yeah.
But it's, you can't always be there.
No, you can't. And as they get older, that's even more true. And you don't always have the same ability to guide them as they get, because I like to think, as parents, we're guides, we're teachers, we're guides, and a teacher doesn't do everything for a student. A guide, if I think of a guide taking someone on let's say, for example, a rock climbing expedition, a guide is going to help you make sure that you're safe, but they're not going to do everything for you. And so I think you point out it's thinking of yourself as a guide or teacher. But I'll tell you, the biggest problem, I think, is that parents are so insecure with themselves and so fearful about life that they do things with their kids that are out of integrity just because of their own insecurities. And that has multiple layers of problems for our kids, because they're not learning. They're not learning what they need to learn. They're picking up a lot of anxiety and stress around it, and it's not making sense to them, because they can feel. Kids will feel if something's not in integrity, just as we can. But sometimes older people, we've forgotten to check in on that. Little kids will definitely feel it.
Right.
It's a big learning opportunity.
Do you think the pendulum swings back and forth? There's the cliche of it skips a generation, where when the kids grow up, they say, well, when I have my kids, I'm never going to do like my father did.
Right.
And it seems to go on and on and on like that, generation after generation.
I think there's certainly some of that. I also think we're in the midst of a change.
Well,
I think it is shifting.
Okay, but do you think it's any different now than it was in the 60s? In terms of the social divide between the parents and the kids? Because it was a huge one in the 60s.
Yeah. It's a little bit different, because what I was pretty young in the 60s, so I can't speak to that, that specifically, but it was almost as if that divide there, what I see different now is the parents are so involved in their children's lives. That's really different. So there might be a push against the parents, but we talked about the word fuse and being fused. Yeah. I think a lot of parents are fused with their children. They want them to go to this college because they didn't get to go to it, or then it will look good to their friends at, in their social circle or whatever it is. So I think there's more of, you think about the kids in the 60s were pretty much on their, I know a lot of people who basically said, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And they just took off at 16, 17, 18. And they went and they because they felt so strongly that they were different from their parents, that they just hitchhiked to Berkeley or
San Francisco.
They went and were involved in a riot, or, they didn't. Our kids have been more babied in a way where I think they're less likely to do that now. They might want to, but they're less likely to. And unfortunately, I think what they're doing instead is suicide has gone up, drug and substance abuse has gone up in our kids. And I think they're just saying, I can't blank take this, and I need to check out in one way or another. Whereas I think in the 60s, the kids actually said,
bye-bye.
Okay, Mom, Dad, bye-bye. I'm going to go do it my way. And there was a little bit more of that. I've talked to a lot of people who were teenagers in the 60s, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't like that high school I was going to. So I hitchhiked to another state, and I enrolled myself in my last year so I could finish high school. You don't hear that very often.
Yeah, I don't hear that at all. No.
No.
Well, you mentioned the word, we keep using the word fused. Now the kids are fused to the iPhone,
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, I know families that have like turn off the phone hour where all the kids get, if they have 2 or 3 kids, every computer in the house goes off, every phone goes off, and they sit and talk to each other. And I guess
good for those parents.
Well, good for the parents, but I think it's torture for the kids. I think they're just waiting. They're just like clawing at the sofa, waiting to get up to go back to their Facebook. Or
Snapchat.
Or wherever.
That seems to be the. I don't even think emails are read anymore. Once you go below age 17, 16, I don't think the email. I don't check my email. It takes up too much storage space on my phone.
Oh no, email is for old folks. Yeah, right. It's already that far away, No. But, well, listen, Dr. Ciel, we're going to wrap this up. We went well over our 20 minutes, but see, I told you we're just getting started. And
there's so much to say.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really nice talking to you.
Thank you for having me on.
Very informative. You're not plugging anything, right? You don't have a book you're pushing, or
you know what? Anyone can get a free copy of the Rock Solid book if you want to start taking some steps on your own to prepare for good, solid relationships, whether it be parenting, whether it be significant romantic relationship, or even at work. You can get that. You can just go to my website. You can click on get a free copy of the book. You can get that there. You can check out some of the other things, tips and things like that on there. So that's www.drlauraciel.com, DRLAURACIEL.com.
Terrific. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with all of your projects and everything you're doing.
Thank you very much for having me on. Wonderful to talk with you.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Dr. Laura Ciel, and also thank you to Sara P and Crosshairkid for their wonderful music. This is Douglas Coleman saying, I'll see ya when I see ya.
It's a big